People ask me all the time, like, what are the best for this? What are the best for that?
Is the secret one.
Chubbs Peterson said it's all in the hips, right? Because, again, I work with mainly normal people. Everything I do is based off, like, real-life experience.
So obviously, he's doing just fine, but I'm like, oh, no.
She's like, oh, his wrists are terrible. We take our feet for granted.
Professional athletes, regular people, we all have things that we're needing to work on.
The fun is kind of in the journey, right? If you quit working on it, it's going to go back to shit.
Yeah, it's going back. It's always about the anticipation. It's killing me.
You're going to have some problems there.
Welcome to the Lift Heavy Swing Fast podcast.
Welcome everybody to our show today.
Episode number 7.
Is it? Are you sure?
Yeah.
What if we decide to change?
Oh my gosh, then this will permanently just people will just tune the fuck out.
Yeah, they're gonna be so upset.
They're gonna be so upset with us.
If we change our mind, like, hey, this was a great episode to release at a later time.
Because there are lots of fucks to be given about our episode number.
You never know. I mean, we have some very serious listeners.
We do. We have some good ones, and we appreciate each and every one.
We did, absolutely.
We've got a good topic today.
We have a great topic today.
Yeah.
I just made a bunch of YouTube videos about this topic. I actually did like a 3-part series.
Your series. Yes.
Yeah, so this has been something I've talked about a lot lately, I guess.
Well, it's a good one because everyone who golfs probably has one of these things that we're going to talk about today.
Oh, of the 3 like main ones we're going to hit on, I'd say like
95%
easily has at least one.
Yeah.
I mean, when I made these videos, it was based off, everything I do is based off like real life experience for the most part. And when I make the one about like hip mobility or shoulder mobility, it's like, okay, well, almost every person I assess is limited in one of these. I'd say every single one.
All right, today's topic. We got to give the topic.
Oh yeah, go ahead and give the topic.
It's always about the anticipation. It's killing me.
Oh, did I kill the anticipation?
No. Go ahead. You deliver the topic today.
Yeah. So the topic we're just going to call it is common body issues that affect your swing.
Yeah. So we're not talking. This is not really injuries per se. This is just like contraindications, maybe ish.
You can put it that way. Yeah. TPI would call it the body swing connection.
Okay.
So these are just things that pop up for, like we said, a lot of people that will change the way you have to swing the golf club.
Right.
Now, when I say this, I've also done evaluations on professional golfers, and you would do this evaluation on them, and you would think that they can't do the things they do in their swing, but then somehow miraculously, when you put a golf club in their hands, they turn into like Superman or woman, and they can do all these things again. So, but your typical person's not.
Okay. All right.
So it's pretty interesting when you see that, because when you work with a professional, it's like, okay, well, they figured out how to make this happen, but when you just ask them to do it standing here without a golf club in their hand, they can't do it as well. So it's kind of interesting that way. But yeah, we're just going to go over a few things with the body. And if you want to really kind of see some exercise on how to fix them, you can check out some of my other YouTube videos, but we're just going to talk about it today and how it can negatively impact your swing and just kind of some things you can do to fix it.
All right, let's go from, I think we should go from like least common to most common. What do you think?
I like that. So least common is where you want to start, or most common.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think least common of like, we're just gonna stick to like these big 3 that I've kind of talked about today, and then I'll kind of sprinkle in a few. So of the least common, so we did 3 topics. It's the shoulders, hips, and ankles. Shoulders would probably be, actually, in my experience, be the least common.
Okay.
Like, actually, a lot of people can get their shoulders to an okay spot. I do like 3 ratings when I do these evaluations. I'll call it like bad, okay, and good.
All right. Well, we need to back up though, because we're talking about the 3 common body issues. Shoulders isn't a body issue. We all have shoulders. So what's the issue with the shoulders?
Oh, okay. Yeah, good point. Mainly shoulder external rotation.
Okay. And let's explain what that is.
So if we were going to stand here, and I just want to try to make this like as basic as possible. If you were to stand here and make your arm into 90 degrees, keep it at your side. So 90 degrees being your upper and lower arm, kind of like if you were in like the halfway point of a bicep curl.
Okay.
And it's to your side. Now take that up to the side. And now take your hand and rotate it back towards your head. That would be shoulder external rotation. Or you don't have to actually lift it. You could just take
go like this,
you
right?
can just do that.
Yeah,
too.
like you're opening.
Yeah, you just take your hand and move it outwards. So that's external rotation
you
of
went
your shoulder.
Full PT evaluation.
Yeah, because that's like, well, for golf, like we usually get it in that position. But anyways,
fair enough.
Yeah, so that's shoulder external rotation.
Okay.
And the assessment we do, and like I learned a lot of these from TPI, and then I've grabbed a few other ones along the way. they call it the 90-90 test. And what they want to see is from standing straight up, you were looking at someone down the line. So I'd be looking at the side of your body. You would raise the arm up into that 90-90 position, and you would rotate your shoulder backwards.
Okay.
And the landmarks they look for is if you can get to spine angle, that would be okay. If you can't get there, that would be bad. And if you can go past, that's good. I've seen very, very few people, because again, I work with mainly normal people that spend a lot of their time commuting to work, working on a computer. So they're pretty rounded forward. Their shoulders get pretty tight. So they cannot, I've seen most of them can't quite get to what you would call like okay. They can't get quite to that like spine angle. A good chunk of them can get to that spine angle, but I don't think I've seen anyone, especially a man, in my experience, and I've done hundreds of these now, get past what they would call your spine angle. So that'd be like good. So like really good external shoulder rotation, myself included. Actually, I can do it now because I've been working on it. But yeah, so that would be probably the least common of the three things we're going to talk about today.
I think women can definitely have a little bit more shoulder than men do. Y'all have like giant. What gets in the way?
Women have more mobility, period.
Yeah. I just feel like sometimes men too with their pecs, like you said, it's the forward shoulder. Just they're so tight.
Yeah, women too. I mean, I think where women struggle with is they lack the scapular stability,
right,
to allow the shoulder blade to move in external rotation. So if that happens, there's other tests we do to kind of see like what happens to your shoulder blade. So like you'll get down into like your golf posture and do the test again, which really challenges your scapular stability, your shoulder blade. And that's where women tend to struggle. Okay. So when you get them into golf posture, but just standing, women usually do a little bit better than men on this, and all mobility tests for that matter.
Yeah, fair enough.
Women just, are short of men in like strength and power tests, right?
Yes.
For the most part. That's not a knock on women. That's just a fact. I'm not trying to be sexist.
It's a fact.
It's just a fact of life. So yeah, that being two issues right there: scapular stability and then shoulder external rotation. So you want to work on both, and you want to identify which one is your problem. Likely, you probably have a little bit of both. But like I said, men, it's usually just shoulder external rotation. Well, the problem there is, and I'm going to kind of try to explain this without getting on video and getting up and demonstrating. But if you can kind of take your swing, I'm a right-handed player, so we'll talk about it from a right-hander's point of view. If I go to my backswing and I get up to the top of my backswing, a popular term in golf right now or forever has been to shallow the club. Have you even heard that?
Yes.
That you want to shallow the golf club?
Yes.
Okay. So if your shoulder is too internally rotated, you're going to be pretty steep. All right. And if you can, as my coach, Justin Kraft calls it, he says, pinch the elbow. But what he's a good coach, so he's putting in terms people understand. Pinch the elbow, bring the elbow in. But what you're actually doing up at the shoulder is externally rotating the shoulder. Mm-hmm. And then you can get the club shallower, more on plane, and things like that. So if you lack the ability to externally rotate your shoulder, you're going to have some problems there. So that some of the exercises you can do, a lot of banded stuff. And never forget that strength training is also mobility training. So if you can perform an overhead press correctly, that's a good way to get your shoulder stronger in external rotation. If you're just pressing it straight up overhead, you've got to externally rotate your shoulder to get to that position. Some people can't even do that. So they have to work up to a landmine first or something, and then they can gain the range of motion to perform an overhead press. But there's countless mobility drills. We'll probably just kind of link those videos down below so people can see some of those. But just anything that you can challenge and get your strength to, like a band, if it's in front of you, get to that 99 position again. If you can imagine what I described there, rotate that back and press up is probably one of my favorite ones to.
Gets to strengthen the rear delt.
Rear delt, rotator cuff. We're just getting that external shoulder rotation. Also trains that scapular stability that we need in the shoulder blade as well.
Yeah. Honestly, I feel like the overhead press crushes this if you can. But to your point, you can't just necessarily. Not everyone can just hop into that. But that's where dumbbells can be really useful too for people that don't know that. If you're feeling limited by the barbell because it's restrictive because it's in a very specific shape, you can use dumbbells to give your body a little bit more free range. But maybe, I don't know if that's giving you really what you want, because then you can kind of cheat a little bit. But
people will turn the dumbbell a little more to change because obviously if you have it out like this, your palm facing forward, you're going to externally rotate your shoulder more. You can internally rotate it a little bit like this. And then, I don't want to dive too deep into all the things that play along with this, but your lat flexibility, the big muscle in your back for people that I don't know how do you say, is it latissimus dorsi, whatever the hell?
Miss Dorsey?
Yeah, so I don't even know.
Nobody says that.
No one says that. It's
No
your
one says
lats, the
that.
big muscles in your
I don't
back. They are a shoulder internal rotator. So you'll notice like if you can't, that it's a lot easier to like kind of lift your hand up over your head with your shoulder internally rotated versus being externally rotated. I think I just did it backwards for the view there for people. So internal, external, but so that can play a contributing factor as well, like to not be able to externally rotate your shoulder, especially in that range of motion that we're talking about at the top of the backswing.
Got it. Okay.
So not to like steer too far away from this, but they're all connected back there. You got to be mindful of all of them.
Oh, 100%. Well, yeah, we'll link. I'll definitely link in the show notes a couple of kind of like top 3, I think, of the exercises we recommend to help with each of these.
Yeah, on a podcast, I don't think it's good for me to sit there and just explain exercises on a podcast. Just say, if you can't do the test, again, we have videos for this, but like if you can't do this test, you can't externally rotate your shoulder. You need to work on it.
Goddamn right.
So it's going to affect your golf swing.
All right, what's next up? Ankles were last. Ankles were last.
Well,
hips is next. Is that what you said?
I mean, again, like, you kind of just put me on the spot for least to most, and I don't.
I just wanted to make it interesting. it didn't need to be that serious.
Yeah,
Cody,
so
of course, is like so literal, and it needs to be like serious. It's not that serious.
I don't know. Let's just probably the least common. I mean, I would say. Okay, well we'll talk about ankles because those people might have slightly better ankles than they do hips, but most people's they're struggling on both.
Yeah, I agree. I would agree with that, like high level thinking about it. But the more I think people think that they're hips because we're thinking about our hips so much, and I think hip mobility is like more out there. But I feel like ankles is the secret one. It's the secret sauce. We'll do ankles last.
It's not talked about enough, and
it's not talked about enough.
It's just another one of those things. Like if you lack ankle, and let's talk about like these are like the two extremities, right? Like you talk about your ankles and wrists. If you have like bad ankles and wrists, then
you have bad shoulders and hips.
You got a lot of bad things, but then also like for a golfer, you're just kind of setting yourself up for something to happen one day. And like this isn't an injury prevention like podcast, but like for me, I neglected my wrists for a long time, and even my PT. Like one of the first things she like tells this other PT that's going to work with me for the day because she was too busy. She's like, "Oh, his wrists are terrible." Like that was like one of the first things out of her mouth, and I was like, "Oh, okay." Like, so like that's why one of the reasons why I have golfer's elbow is because like I have lack of mobility in my wrist. But we're talking about the ankles today. It's just something that people don't really think about, and like we really. What's the word I'm looking for here is we take our feet for granted. We take like what happens down there, and until like you have a foot issue or even a toe issue or something like that, like you really neglect those things down there, and it can cause a big problem, maybe a big pain in your ass if you don't take care of it. And I think a prime example of someone how you can see that ankle mobility really changes a golf swing is you look at John Rahm. John Rahm was born with a club foot. So his foot cannot move. His ankle does not move in the way that a lot of people's ankles will. And that's why so when you can't roll your ankles very well, you can't move them, you can't really like shift to one side because you'll really kind of lose your balance. Like you don't really, until you like really think about what your foot's doing down there and how different it has to move for you to get in these positions and be stable in them, then you'll never really notice this. But like, that's why John Rahm doesn't take a giant full backswing. That's why he has to swing the way he does because of that foot doesn't move. So there's a pretty extreme example that a lot of people can, think about. But, where does movement start for us, right? It's down our feet and our ankles. And that really works its way up the entire kinetic chain of your body. Like if you have a weak link there, you either have to overcompensate somewhere else, somewhere like all the way up. It could be your hips. It could be your shoulders. But yeah, if you don't take care of your ankles or really work on ankle mobility, there's some things all the way up that have to make big changes.
Yeah, I think actually I sprained my ankle this year playing pickleball, LOL. But I learned that I'm actually very mobile in my ankles, which I've always worked on because when I started strength training and doing squatting and doing all the things and learning how important ankle mobility was for the squat, I'm like, all right, I really want to work on this even more because I ran for so long and I kind of felt like, I didn't have it wasn't the best. It wasn't that bad. But again, I think as a female, I kind of had just an advantage in general. But I've been working on my ankle mobility, but now I almost feel like I did it to a fault. I don't think so. I don't think I necessarily did, but the stability part of the ankle is what I was missing out on. So it's always like a balance between both sides. I feel like in all of our joints, it's like We can't be too loosey goosey, which
right.
women tend to have those issues in hips, especially because our hips are supposed to be a little bit more loosey goosey. But I think making sure that we're not overdoing it in one realm or the other is important too.
100%.
I know this isn't a stability podcast either, but you can have too much of a good thing.
Right. And I mean, in my experience, right, with my golfer's elbow, very immobile wrists, and I have hypermobility in my elbow. And it's caused me a world of problems.
Right.
So,
There's too much activity happening in your elbow, and it's tearing up your joints.
Right.
Literally.
Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, good point. I mean, you got to work on both, especially down at the feet. Yeah, I mean, your foot should be stable. The foot, like all the muscles in your foot, you want to be stable, but then you want the ankle to be mobile. And you don't want it, like, again, when you do a TPI evaluation, if you've ever done one, they really just kind of test ankle dorsiflexion, which is like if you were to get down on the ground and you were trying to push your knee over your toes, like just straight forward, that's ankle dorsiflexion. That plays a massive role in your golf swing, believe it or not. But there's also the ability to pronate and supinate your foot, or they call it like ankle inversion, ankle eversion.
I just think of Scotty Scheffler.
Right.
I mean,
100%.
I worry about him. He's doing just fine, but I'm like, God damn it. Like one of these days, are his feet just going to fall off?
Yeah,
like,
he's got to have who knows? Maybe he has shit ankle mobility, and he just and that's why they move they move all over the place. I think it could go one way or the other. I don't.
Yeah, I'm
know.
just curious. Like with this, we're spitballing. We obviously like have no idea, but I'm just like, is he gonna just be hurt one day? Or I never thought about it like that. Or is he super bad and immobile and he's stable, so that's why he doesn't like sprain his ankle when he swings his golf club?
I think. I mean, who's his coach? Or his physio is Dr. Troy Van Beesen. If you're listening to this, Dr. Troy, let me know if his ankles are.
Like what's his deal? Like I want to know what's he doing.
I think it could truly go both ways. I would have to imagine they're pretty mobile to do what he does. I'm just kind of like being the devil's advocate here a little bit. Like, but maybe they are just like locked up, and he has to move them all around like crazy to get. But the finishing stances he gets into. But he's also wearing shoes, so like you don't really know.
I look at it and I'm like, aha. Sometimes because they zoom in. I'm like, oh, no.
I mean, his foot could literally just be like on the side of his shoe, though. Like maybe his shoes are loose.
Bro, I don't know. I think he's bendy.
This is just me playing devil's advocate, to be honest.
I don't know. I think like really good athletes kind of have like some freak things going on. That might be his freak thing.
And we were watching that
even John Rahm has his own freak thing that he made him really good at like the way that he swings. I mean, there's
I mean, we were watching the basketball documentary on Netflix the other night, and LeBron James's toes are disgusting. And they're like all over the place. And
all
he's
of those guys, any of these 7 foot guys, let's see all of their fucking toes. I'm going to tell you right now, like 97% of their feet are weird looking. You think these 17 feet tall guys have beautiful petite feet?
And his are super weird. But anyways.
Dude. Anyway, all right.
So and then there's a ton of ankle exercises you can do, and I think just a lot of people don't do them. But yeah, you really need to work on your ankle mobility, because then it all these things can lead to problems, right? Like if you don't take care of your ankles, you could end up with like knee pain or something like that. Or, I mean, you also need like big toe mobility is another thing like you don't think about ever. But it's something you need in the golf swing too. It's kind of funky, but just trust me on that and work on it, because it's only going to do positive things for you.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, the ankles are a big one. Because we talked about feet in the last podcast, I think, for some reason.
I think I always talk about feet.
Yeah, feet are important. Your feet are... Cody's been dealing with plantar fasciitis his whole life. Amongst other things. Now you have, poor ankle mobility and all the things, but
I've always had poor.
You've had like pretty tough go with your feet.
I mean, yeah, people
and
probably,
your toes don't spread out. And
people are probably like, man, this guy's supposed to like be, know what he's talking about, and he's got all these problems. But I think it really does make you
self-study.
Yeah, it really does make you. I mean, again, like now that I've had all these issues personally, and I didn't really have. I had plantar fasciitis years ago when I was doing like Spartan races and CrossFit and stuff like that. I've never really had like any other problems until the golfer's elbow.
Yeah.
Became a thing, but so I've been pretty lucky. Just they're limited, so I found workarounds, and a lot of people just find workarounds forever.
That's exactly right.
And like, I mean, would this lack of ankle mobility ever like probably cause me knee pain and stuff like that down the road? I mean, who knows? In my golf swing. I don't know. Maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe I get away with it forever, but it's definitely limiting my golf swing.
Right.
So, because I can't roll my foot, because then what happens is if you can't like roll your ankles, and if, we kind of talked about positioning and power when I was talking about John Rahm, but then for someone like me, since I can't like really roll my ankle to the inside, like my trail leg, I can't roll, or Coach Justin Kraft calls it banking. I can't get that leg to now move towards my lead side and get out of the way, so I push it forward since it can't roll, and then that eliminate some of the space I have in my swing, so then I have to like early extend to get the club to shallow and come around my knee. So all these things can happen.
You're a mess. Is
I'm
hips next?
Hips are next.
Okay.
So this would be the most common,
I guess so. I mean, I kind of think I flipped it earlier when I said that I thought we were going to do ankles last, but it's okay. I mean, we both agreed hips and ankles are probably equal.
Yeah.
So we'll wrap it up with hips, because
Yeah.
hips is a big one.
Yeah.
It is a much larger joint. Joint? Do you call the hips a joint? Group
Yeah.
of joints?
Yeah.
Joint.
I mean, if we're talking about the lumbopelvic hip complex, it'd be like a different.
But
We're talking about just like the hip.
Okay.
Yeah, the ball and socket joint of the hip. Yeah.
Okay.
This is definitely the most common. I mean, Happy Gilmore, said it's all in the hips, or Chubbs Peterson said it's all in the hips, right? So I think if you're going to work on anything like really well, it probably should be your hips, because you can get away with a little bit more, right? Kyle's kind of talking about overcompensating, which you don't really want to do, but the hips are big, and you can get a lot out of the hips.
They are, and I think this goes back. We talk a lot about like activities of daily living on this podcast, because that's who we deal with too. Or just like, ankles. You're probably okay in your normal day-to-day life if your ankles aren't like the most mobile. But if you're starting fucking with your hips, you got lower back. You can't sit in a chair. It hurts to do the things. I just feel like the hips are affecting a lot more for the average person too.
Yeah. You can get a lot in the golf swing. You can get a lot out of the hips. Like you can, if you're only going to work on one of these three things, like, hey man, I don't have the time, I'm going to pick one and go for it, which would kind of be a silly way to do it. But
when it comes to hip mobility, like what's the issue?
Internal and external rotation for sure. I mean,
okay.
Probably all of it: hip, internal, external rotation, flexion, extension. I mean, people have kind of issues doing all of it. But I think when you talk about the golf swing, people are really going to want to know more about internal and external rotation of the hip. Should I describe what that is?
Yeah, I think we should, because when I was in yoga teacher training, I remember learning this, and I think I've heard Squat University talk about this a ton when he talks about knees going more forward or out, because people's are very individual with like where their, what is it, your iliac crest or however which direction that points in, like to base off of like where your knee would go like in a squat. And
right.
So like in yoga, we learned like if you're in a frog pose, sometimes that's a lot easier for more people, where you're like pressing your hips down and your knees are out. So that would be like an external rotation,
right.
versus like, and even just like a warrior or like a lunge, just like where you're internally rotating, or like a pigeon, like that can feel a lot more overwhelming for people.
Right.
So this isn't about yoga poses, but I'm just thinking back to when I was doing that training and learning a lot about like the different ways that so in the golf swing, I'm sure that's the same thing, where it's like some people, I would guess some people have one stronger than the other, versus like both being terrible.
Right.
And they might not know, but let's explain to them like what each one is.
I mean, so yeah, if we can just, if you want to test you can probably just look up these on YouTube, like look up the Faber test and look up just like an internal hip rotation test. But basically the way if we're talking about rotation, if you're sitting in a chair and you were to kick your leg out, I always tell people it's kind of like turning a truck back, like backing up a trailer. Because if I take my foot out to the right, it looks like, my foot is going away from my body. So a lot of people think that's external because it's going away, right? But if with a bent knee, but what's happening up here up the hip is actually internally rotating. And then if I go the other way, it's external rotation.
Yes.
Most people, men and women, will have more, substantially more external rotation than they will internal rotation, right? There's several ways to test this, but I think it just plays a massive role in both the downswing and the backswing of the golf swing. So as you go for a right-handed player, when you go into your backswing, you are going to be, and you do both internal and external of each hip just on opposite times. So when you go into your backswing as a right-handed player, you are internally rotating into your right hip and you are externally rotating your left hip. Then the exact opposite happens when you go to your downswing. Now I'm going to internal into my left hip and my right hip is going to externally rotate. So that's a pretty good way to do it. And I mean, you can have a host of problems happen if you can't. I mean, you could have a short backswing. You could early extend. You could lose your posture. You could have a flat shoulder plane. You could do, I mean, probably every swing fault could probably somehow be attributed to like immobile hips.
Immobile hips. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's kind of the powerhouse of the body.
Absolutely. I mean, and the hips is where you're transferring the power from your lower body to your upper body. So I mean, there's countless hip. I won't even start to begin to talk about hip mobility exercises out there because there's so many of them. But I do think if you are limited in your shoulders or your ankles and your hips, like you probably are going to get the quickest like notice if you start. You're going to notice the fastest if you start working on your hips. How big of a difference that can make for you, because it can also it could just kind of overcompensate for if you're lacking elsewhere too, because it can make such a big difference.
100%. Yeah, and I think that the variety is there too with the amount of exercises that you can do, which again we'll link our top 3, top 4 of maybe each of the ones that we've mentioned, but to where you can probably start to see the progress, like you said, a little faster, just because like I think there's a lot more, and just again back to strength training and compound lifts and things like that. If you start to get good at those, like I think your hip mobility also gets better because your movements
100%.
are better.
Yeah, and I mean, yes, when you said linking top exercise, because people ask me all the time, like, what are the best for this? What are the best for that? It's always like, well, if you're not doing anything, here's probably like where the best ones to start. After you've been doing it for a while, I mean, exercise variety is huge, right? Or else there would only be 5 exercises because one would be the best for everything. And then I wouldn't have a job and neither would any trainer on the face of the earth, right? Because if these were the only 5 exercises you ever needed to do, then that would be the end of it, you know? So it's different exercises for different persons. And there's always got to be a variety. Once you've gotten really good at one exercise, once you kind of mastered it, then it's time to move on to the next one. Or just for the sake of wanting variety in your life, you need more than a few, but definitely we will link some below for all of these.
We'll also link our mobility program. I think this is like a perfect time to mention that we have a mobility assessment, which is extremely thorough. And so if you're like wondering, where should I start? I mean, maybe you're nodding your head and you're feeling like you have all 3, which like, again, people out there, like that's okay. These are all very, very common. That's why we're talking about them. It's helpful to kind of go through an assessment if you don't know where to look, to understand like where your limitations are. So that way you can like literally go through that assessment and then have like, how many just exercises are in our mobility program to choose from? Like at least 100.
I don't know.
I don't want it to sound overwhelming because it's not, but then you kind of get the option to choose which exercises are going to be the best for you and like what you're needing to work on. So we'll link that in this episode too. Just so you guys know exactly where to find it.
Yeah, and don't be discouraged if you have, these are just the least or the most common ones that I've seen, and you could easily have all 3 and some more.
Yes,
that wouldn't be uncommon either.
Yes, Cody and I are always working through our own things too. So nobody is that is the true thing. Like professional athletes, regular people, we all have things that we're needing to work on. It's kind of like the crazy thing about the body.
It's also kind of the fun thing too.
Yeah. Totally. Yeah. Can you imagine if we were all robots and we just like moved all the exact same way? Like so many people would be out of jobs, but also like it wouldn't be the fun.
Well, the fun, you always got to remember the fun is kind of in the journey, right? Like if you have a problem, figuring out the solution and then working on it to get the reward makes the reward so much better.
Yes. And then like learning how to navigate your own and then just keeping it up and doing the maintenance around that and like making yourself better. It's very rewarding.
Oh yeah. Maintenance is huge on that too. Like, so just because maybe you have shit hip mobility and you fix it, if you quit working on it, it's going to go back to shit hip
it's going back. No matter how much you worked on it, it goes back. So yeah, that's true. I'm sure anybody that's gone through an injury knows that.
And one last thing, and we'll wrap this up, is I'm kind of thinking about coming out with something called like meathead mobility. Like people don't really think that they think mobility training is just a bunch of like stretches and kind of messing around like body weight stuff and like bands and being goofy and stuff like that. Not being goofy, but just not really training hard. And I think there's a missed opportunity there for people to realize that, I can like kind of move some weight around and like feel that same stimulus that I get from lifting heavy, but in this different range of motion
Oh, hell yeah.
that I need. So
Yeah.
look
And
out for that.
actually like see hypertrophy from it too, by the way.
You can, yeah.
Yes.
And you
100%.
can get tired. I mean, you can do it for high reps and,
Yeah.
you know, train endurance. You can get sweaty. You can do all sorts of stuff with mobility training. It's not just messing around.
Nope. I know. I'm excited for meathead mobility.
Yeah.
Trademark.
Well, I mean, trademark. This podcast won't come out for a few weeks, so we'll see if it it lands.
Maybe it'll be out by then.
Oh, it'll definitely be out by then, but
Okay.
we'll see if
I
it's.
didn't know it was coming out that fast. Okay. Stay tuned for Meathead Mobility.
Well, it's not a program. It's just gonna be posts on my Instagram.
Oh,
and
well,
a, and a, and a YouTube video.
Make a program.
Nah,
Maybe
nah,
it
nah.
will.
Maybe it will. If it takes off, it's gonna be a thing. But we'll see. Maybe you guys will be listening to this, like, oh, I saw that. It sucked.
Yeah. the least performing content you've ever done.
Yeah, like that got one like. No one liked that shit.
Thank you for the one like.
I appreciate the one like.
Thank
Appreciate
you,
that.
one like. All right, guys.
It would be from you.
Well, literally me and Squat. LiftHeavySwingFast.com for you guys to find all of our blogs, YouTubes, links to our old episodes. That is where you will find all of the things. And of course, our programs and the mobility program that we were just kind of chatting about. Hit us up. We want to hear from you. And we are excited to talk to you next week.
Yeah, thanks, guys.